So, what we're gonna do with you today is to evaluate and calculate the return on investment and the cost associated with three main approaches that the organizations can take when planning for the expansion of their teams. Um, Founders oftentimes are taking a data-driven approach to the decision making when it comes to any product decisions, features that they want to, to implement based on feedback, even the marketing campaigns that they're planning with regards to moving their product to larger audiences. Unfortunately, not the same is oftentimes happening when it comes to hiring cost and generally understanding the pluses and minuses of all of the different approaches that you could take. So this video is made for the founders and CTOs and CPOs who are striving to expand their team, but are not yet sure how to evaluate all of the options that are available for them. So we're going to have a look at the three main strategies, as I mentioned, which is hiring with the internal resources, then hiring with the engaged or retained search firm, and then hiring with what I call a spray and pray approach, which will mean that you're engaging a multitude of the contingency firms on the same kind of searches for the same roles and basically catching everyone and anyone who they send your way. Now, our variables in terms of the cost factors are going to be based on the salary of the role, of course, the salary of the people who are involved in interviewing the individual, and of course, the internal cost. Now, our outcome value to salary is taken as 7 times the salary of the role, which could be, of course, a lot larger depending on the goal and the mission of the role. And our standard time to fill, as it does oftentimes happen, or our requirement to fill the role, is 30 days, which will inevitably happen in the engaged or retained situations, since this is a standard KPI in this cases. Now let's have a look at the cost which is associated with hiring with the internal resources. Your time, right, as a founder, CTO, and CPO will be engaged into this calculation as well, because we'll need about 1.5 weeks of your time to properly interview the individuals and to effectively manage the process. The internal team costs would also be a standard 30% of our salary of the role, and that effectively will cover the scheduling, the internal recruiter, the HR, and the anybody who deals with the process, with assisting the process to go through. So effectively summing that up, we're arriving at almost 99,000 as a cost for when you're hiring internally. For the engaged or retained search, the classical fee structure is between 30 and 35%. So let's take 30% in here. And of course, we will we will involve all of the interviewers, of course, a lot less. Yet, because the retained search firms oftentimes handpick very clearly the individuals that they want to recommend for the roles, there is a lot less for you to do, and they're equally managing the process end to end. So think about the scheduling, the pre-negotiation of a salary. So really, the investment time, the investment of a time from your side as individuals within the company is considerably smaller than in any other cases. So our total cost will be about 61,950, and that will be roughly 31%, which is not a big difference based on our 30% direct fee to the team overall. And moving to the spray and pray approach, of course, the fee here will be a lot less. So instead of 30, we're getting 20%, let's say, of the fee. But at the same time, our engagement of the of the time of the individuals who are involved in the process is actually increasing. Why? Because as the teams working on the contingency will not be investing a lot of the time in screening and qualifying the individuals, that responsibility will be moving on onto your shoulders as the hiring team. But together, that responsibility would also be partially moving into your internal team. So anybody who is, handling all of the agencies that are involved in the process, internal recruiter, someone to do the scheduling, someone to be connecting with the individuals separately for the feedback sessions, HR questions, etc. That cost is, we would estimate it as a third of our initial internal cost. So in essence, what we're arriving at the total cost of hiring for this specific role at close to 138,000, which is about 69% from the salary of the for that we've budgeted for the role, right? And that's based only on the 30-day kind of requirement. If we're spending the time for much longer, our costs would be increasing here because we have a lot more for people involved, a lot more of the interviews to present the feedback from, a lot more of the candidates that are, being sent our way, and we have to screen them. So that cost, as well as the remaining costs of the individuals who are involved into this, will be increasing. Our return on the investment, of course, will be, a ratio of the two, to the of the outcome to the cost of the hire, and essentially it will not go above the 1,000% in case we're just hiring internally or applying the spray and pray approach. Of course, the best case scenario here would be relatively fixed cost with a commitment of the 30 days, and of course committing to proper representation and to also a result as it stands. So some of the considerations for you to take as a founder or CTO or CPO when engaging a firm on this basis is, of course, the representation, right? So oftentimes I'm hearing an argument that, well, the spray pray approach, it's cheaper. I've just proven to you that it actually is a lot more expensive, twice as much expensive, in fact. And you do end up, focusing on what the recruitment firm is supposed to be doing, rather than, dedicating, specific resource who are more knowledgeable of the market than perhaps you would be, because this is not your first kind of line of the focus in your role. So in this particular approach, there are, however, a couple of the considerations that I'd like to outline because they're not always taken into account. And your cost, in fact, could be growing exponentially if you're not taking those into the consideration. So first and foremost, of course, is your representation on the market, especially for the early stage organizations. The brand is everything. So if you have a very niche talent pool that is being approached over and over and over again by a multitude of the agencies, individuals are indeed thinking that something is wrong with that company because they're continuously recruiting and they can't find somebody. So that must mean that there is either the toxic environment, or there's, the management is not very, let's say, pleasant, or what they're striving to do is really not worthwhile. So that really can stagnate your growth in the long term, and that's not the consideration that I would advise you to just forget about. But in fact, your representation, especially early stage, has to be top notch in order to attract the right people to your team. Otherwise, you can't really retain them as well, and you're risking attracting the wrong kind of a folk into your organization. The candidate experience, of course, suffers during the spring pre-approach because there's virtually no representation, and therefore you as a candidate, you're just given a glimpse into what the company is and what the process is going to be before you're being like shuffled into into the company itself, and keeping fingers crossed that all of the process is going to go smoothly. Speed is a third consideration to take in here, because you are effectively not quite prioritized from the side of the agency that is, taking the role or with whom you've signed. The speed oftentimes suffers because there could be other priorities, other searches that they're working on. There's no commitment in terms of the timelines or even commitment in finding somebody, right, for the specific role. So you're just sitting as a founder and waiting for the individuals to be sent with no guarantees whatsoever. Oftentimes, these teams don't have any guarantee or very low guarantee of 1 to 3 months, which is, usually covering just the base requirements from their side. Again, that is understandable because the team is not really spending a lot of the time in screening and screening the profiles and just making sure that this is indeed the right fit both ways, right? From both the candidate side and from the company side. Now, the actual statistic is that 1 out of the 7 is the hit rate for all of the sprint pray approach searches. So for all of the contingency searches, you're essentially 6 out of 7 times you're just wasting your time, which could be very disappointing, especially if you're a founder, a CTO, or CPO. It could be actually dedicating your time to something else. The priority of the searches, as I mentioned, is quite low because the market rate, as mentioned, is 30 to 35%. If you're paying 20%, that means that your potential candidates are either being, sent somewhere else where there is a commitment, or there is, kind of closer to the market rate compensation structure, and really you're just getting, those that didn't really come through. The depth of the screening does not really allow to, with a certainty, say that this is indeed the person that will work for you or that will fit you in terms of your expectations. And really, that is attached to both the success rate and the candidate experience that we're observing here. And when it comes, of course, to the market coverage, because of the emphasis on the speed of the operations and really quickly going through the profiles, dedicating 20 minutes and just going through those as fast as you can because you're working on a chance, right? The market coverage remains to be very, very low. So in effect, you are just working with a super active individuals without actually digging deeper and understanding who else could be out there who could be a great fit to my client, to the company that I'm working with. When it comes to, engaging an internal resource to work on your searches, the very first consideration, of course, is the coverage of an individual's network, because if there is, let's say, one specific person that is working on one day marketing and operations role, the next day on the product role, the ground question here is that what is the understanding and what is the network of this specific person, because the time to fill will be inevitably dependent on this as well, and you might actually very well stream into 60 to 90 days kind of search rather than keeping it to the 30 days, which again would stagnate your efforts within the company depending on the priority that you assign to the specific role. The speed, of course, as I mentioned, is the kind of a parameter that streams out of that. And of course, there is no guarantee. So if the internal recruiter found somebody and they left, there is no guarantee. You'll have to contribute the same amount of the cost all over again and invest the same amount of the time and the internal resources to find the same person once again. Now, the priority of the searches here even could be very, very different, because the person might have a different priority and working already on a, let's say, even head of sales or VP of sales role, and deprioritize the role that you're asking the person to take. And that's the internal consideration for you. And of course, the depth of the assessment, if the person is covering both go-to-market roles and the technical roles, they might lack the technical acumen necessary to screen and understand the profiles very, very deeply, and therefore make proper recommendations. So in that effect, the cost will be then becoming a lot closer to what we see in the spray and pray approach, in fact. So hopefully that was helpful for you, and I do hope that you make the right decision and be driven by data.